My name is Christina Ann Merrill. I am recording this video to report that Hopkins County, Kentucky committed federal crimes against myself and my children, and they continue to do so. They have been doing it since 2018. In 2017, my life was taken, as in clinically dead. Heart stopped, had to be defibrillated, 5-inch open skull fracture from my ex-husband, who did not want a divorce. I don't necessarily want to tell everybody the details of this, but I have no choice at this point. And hopefully by the end of this video, which I hope you watch through and share, you will understand why. And so anyway, I was life flighted from Monroe Hospital after being picked up off the ground, scraped up off the ground, as it were, after my children witnessed what happened to me. And the officer asked my ex-husband what happened, and he told the officer that I had tried to kill myself. Okay? My 11-year-old son at the time told the officer the truth about what happened, that wasn't the case, and that the man had tried to murder me, and the officer did not listen. And I'm not real sure if this officer was more concerned about my safety, since I literally was dying on the pavement with 2 foot of blood on either side of my head that my children all witnessed, or if he really just didn't care to do a thorough investigation. But either way, I was life flighted, as I said, to what was then CMC Main Brain Trauma ICU. At that point, after being life flighted from Monroe Hospital to there was a pretty dramatic, obviously, series of events that took place, including my parents being told that I would be a vegetable. And anyway, long story short, I don't want to get into the heavy details. I'm just going to say that I was given by someone who didn't want a divorce a brain injury. And so with that brain injury, the severe traumatic brain injury that I was given, there was also 4 months worth of amnesia from the brain bleeds that were given to me by that situation. But I also want to point out that 10 hours after I code blued and was brought back, I reported in and out of consciousness, open skull fracture, like I said, pretty serious brain damage. In and out of consciousness, I reported to the doctors and nurses what had taken place for me. And so not only did CMC not contact law enforcement, but they left up to the victim of an attempted murder that reported to them what had happened, and that my children were not safe, whether or not I could sign myself out of the brain trauma ICU. So in a walking coma, in and out of consciousness, somehow, after reporting to them that my kids were in danger because this person had done this to me, I was allowed to leave the hospital and law enforcement was not contacted. Okay? So somehow, and I don't know how, because once again, I had 4 months of amnesia from the brain bleeds, but somehow I apparently was able to go back to my home and find my children. But I want to reiterate that this entire time I was in and out of actual consciousness. With brain injury, it takes a while sometimes for your brain to reset itself, we'll say. And sometimes it never does. And in my case, it never has. But so anyway, just to give you a little background, I filed for divorce June 26th of 2017. I had asked my ex-husband, my now ex-husband, to move out the prior May. And not only was he not willing to do that, but he attempted to kill himself in front of me. He was continuously getting drunk and having moments that I don't want to expand on or go into in my head again, because that trauma has taken a toll on myself and my children for a long time. But long story short, he refused. And eventually I told him that, because of his cheating, which is what caused me to ask for a divorce, by the way, and the fact that he was doing that with a heroin addict whose needles he was also having left in our house, I told him that I was not willing to try and repair the marriage. But anyway, fast forwarding back to where I signed myself out, the 4 months worth of amnesia that I had, where I literally lost 7 years of my memory, plus where I could not tell you my name, the year. This is all medically documented, by the way. He chose to use that amnesia as a reason to move back into my home with my children and I. He told my children that if they told me what happened, because again, I had amnesia, couldn't remember anything, okay, that he would effing kill them if they told me what happened. And you have to remember, these kids witnessed it. When my memory began to come back about what had taken place and what he had done to me, and one more time, I want to reiterate in front of my children, I asked him to move out again. Okay? When I did that, I just want to put this out there that there was everything from him breaking into my home when my children and I tried to move and hide from him. We had the support of the community. He was held at gunpoint, which is in an affidavit, by a sheriff. The neighbors saw him breaking into the house that me and my kids were in, breaking the door down, and he had them at gunpoint until the sheriffs got there. I was not allowed to go to court hearings because he took the vehicle that I had, the phone, everything that I had, any way that I had to contact anybody. So even though he was being charged with the things that he was doing, he was finding ways to make sure that I had no way to defend myself. He would show up whenever he wanted to, break the window if the door was locked. I have the corroborating police reports about that. He absolutely broken into and destroyed mine and the kid's house. And I mean literally everything in it. And the sheriffs, who were very helpful, Union County and Anson County, North Carolina, by the way, they looked at me and said that since he refused to sign the divorce papers, even though he destroyed everything the kids and I owned, that it was still considered marital property, so there was nothing that they could do. On August 14th, which is his birthday, by the way, he broke in and he raped me for the first time. 3 o'clock in the morning, no way to call anybody, no way to get any help. I have to be honest with you, part of the reason that I filed for divorce was because I was terrified of the STDs and things like that he could possibly give me. But nothing that I did was enough. Nothing that I did to try and protect my children and I was enough. When I got a call from the district attorney in Anson County, and she said, "Hey, Miss Merrill, I see you didn't show up at court when the domestic violence charges were going through." She said, "But I want to ask you a question." She said, "Do you value your life?" And I said, I do. And she said, "Well, I've looked at the medical records and I realize what's happening here." And so she made a phone call to Union County where it took place, what he had done to me with the open skull fracture portion, etc., and they began to indict him on felony attempted vehicular manslaughter charges. And he found out that he was being indicted, and he began to ride by the house, pointing guns at the kids and I. No matter where I went, he always found us. He would pull in, and there are plenty of witnesses that'll tell you that he would try to run the kids over with his car, the kids that this process concerns. So here's the deal. Eventually, I realized that I had zero protection from him, no matter how hard the sheriff's department had worked, no matter how much CPS had tried. So I went and I got a protective order in North Carolina. And while I was waiting on the court date for that to be formalized, and I need to remind everybody that at this point, it's in effect based on evidence. It's not based on he said, she said. At this point, there is evidence that I submitted to this court. There is also an indictment that's taken place. So this is not he said, she said process. This was absolutely, I had done everything that I needed to do. Sorry. And I was granted the protective order. And so, long story short, when I was granted the protective order, and I realized that I was done being raped, that I was done being gone after, that my children were not safe, I fled to the state of Kentucky. And I self-reported to CPS and Adult Protective Services. I self-reported begging for help. I gave them all the evidence that I had, which at that point was a very large amount. Because for anybody who's wondering, I never wanted for there to be a moment that my children were without their father, if that was possible. So I tried to do whatever it took to make sure that our divorce wasn't going to affect the kids. I wanted them to have their father if possible. Anyway, I get to the Commonwealth of Kentucky, report to CPS and Adult Protective Services, and I told them exactly what I needed. I needed help finding a neurologist, and I needed a place that we could go. I transferred my protective order to Kentucky, and once again there was an entire court date. Like, I presented my evidence to the judge. When I say evidence, I'm talking medical documentation. There was sheriff's affidavits from North Carolina stating what had taken place. There was literally everything that you can imagine in evidence. And I still have all of it. Plus, there was a prior granted protective order in place. So, from the moment that my protective order in Kentucky, it was transferred from North Carolina to Kentucky, but from the moment that happened, life became hell for the kids and I. Even worse than it already was. Because, I went to CPS and I went to Adult Protective Services because I believed that they were going to help keep us safe. The sheriff's department was fully aware as well, by the way, of what was going on. So was Madisonville Police Department. When the protective order was granted by the judge in Hopkins County Family Court, they also released my new address, which is illegal. Okay? So I went to another state to hide. And for reference, just to give you an idea about how insane this all is, even though I fled to Kentucky, this man who had been stalking and harassing the kids and I for the purpose of harm, like he'd already taken my life in front of my children, the abuse allegations were corroborated already, like there was not a question about who he was to myself and my children at all. But in the actual protective order that I filed for in Kentucky first, when I had it transferred from North Carolina to Kentucky, it clearly stated in the report that he was harassing other people around the kids and I that knew who we were, because he was stalking that hard, tracking us down like dogs. And it was made, the court was made fully aware, the family court in Hopkins County was made fully aware that we were being stalked already. So when they released our address to him, now, meanwhile, I found my worth. I knew I was worth more than the way that I was being treated in my marriage. I knew that my right as an American citizen was to file for divorce if I wanted to, and there had been things in the marriage before that were really disturbing and scary, not only from him but from his parents as well. There was child abuse, there was child theft, there was all kinds of really nasty, horrid things, and all I wanted was for my children and I to be able to separate ourselves from that long enough for him to get some help, if you want me to be real. Anyway, from the time that the courts released my address, from the time that I begged for help from CPS and Adult Protective Services, they all turned the situation on myself and my children instead of helping us. We never received any assistance from them, and by law and by policy, that's not the way that this is supposed to go. Okay? But what we did receive was they worked with him, and it is classified under deprivation of rights under color of law and conspiracy to deprive of rights under color of law. They harmed the well-being of my children. When I asked for assistance to recover from my brain injury by them helping me find a neurologist, they instead used that, since I was broke, to not only financially exploit me, but to exploit the disability that man that we had asked for protection from had given me. The night all that took place, when I received the brain injury, it was an attempt to save my children, and I don't want to go into it, but I'm going to tell it to you this way. I believed in these systems. I believed that if I told the truth, if I did what they asked me to do, if I gave them the evidence that I had, that they would protect my children and I. And instead, Hopkins County, not only the CPS, but the family courts, several of the attorneys here, and right now I'm not naming names, but I promise I'm going to be at some point. Sheriff's Department. Yep. Yeah, they've been committing federal crimes against my children and I since 2018. So, when I realized that what was being done to me by the CPS, the family court, the attorneys, the Commonwealth attorney here, when I realized that they were violating every right that the kids and I had to basic safety. And were giving my children to the man that did this to us and did this to me in front of them. When I realized, and I'm going to back up a second, and I'm sorry because I'm giving this the best way I know how. This is really hard to talk about. So anyway, I got an email from an attorney, from my attorney, and he said that the opposing counsel demanded that I hand over my children to this individual, his client, or they were going to make my life a living hell. I got charged with things by CPS, like abusing my children, and they buried me in allegations that they knew my brain injury meant that I wouldn't be able to fight against my inability to communicate properly on my own behalf. They knew. So let me back up. Like I said, I received this email from my attorney that if I don't hand over my children, the 2 that were biologically his, I have 6, to this individual, then they're going to make my life hell. And since I had a protective order in place from the same judge, the same family court judge that gave my children to him by her court order, just want to put that out there. After laughing in court, by the way, about him having given me the brain injury, when I tried to explain to these people how dangerous he is, they laughed at me instead. They did not keep my children safe. Sorry. When I refused to deliver my children over to this person that there was a protective order against because he was a dangerous homicidal maniac, CPS swooped in and took my other 4 also. They took all of them from me. And why? Because apparently that's what happens to domestic violence victims in Kentucky. If your abuser has more money than you do, can hire a better lawyer, then they can harm your children and you over and over and over and over again, and then they can charge you with child support. So, Kentucky foster care, when my children were placed there while we went through this horridly 14th Amendment violating process, this process where my basic well-being and safety for my children wasn't observed, etc. Like we go through this whole process of this court stuff. And they had my children in foster care. Like I said, my daughter ended up getting raped. All of my children were on drugs. My older children, I mean. I begged and begged and begged for them to intercede when I submitted pictures of my youngest baby with black eyes, etc., head injuries, and instead of any of that being addressed, they just kept doing it. They adopted out my youngest baby to the same people that gave him the head injuries that I had reported multiple times. They totally screwed over my oldest children. No matter how many times I begged Kentucky foster care to remove them from where they were. My children all went from A and B students when they were with me, by the way, to, now they were all on drugs, or, my daughter was being arrested after being raped and running for her life. And now Kentucky foster care is going after me for money that I can't pay because I've never been able to legally submit, and neither have any of my attorneys, the information on my disability that was given to me by the man that started all this. So, July 27th, I'm looking at a court date where they determine that even though I have been obstructed, and so have my attorneys, from ever submitting proof of my brain injury that was given to me by another individual, along with the CPTSD, etc., that caused, they're going to try to jail me. And so what a lot of people don't understand is that this is how they keep people silent. Okay? Federal crimes allowing the continued perpetration of acts of domestic violence on myself and my children, interstate domestic violence. The law clearly states that if a person needs to flee the state, which I did in fear of mine and my children's lives. Anyway, all I'm saying is, I cannot explain to you how afraid I am. These people have made my life a living nightmare. I made the mistake of stating publicly what they had done to me, that they had literally stolen my children, federal kidnapping. They were complicit in performing federal kidnapping of my 2 children. They were complicit in every continued act of domestic violence, stalking, harassment, whatever it was that this individual wanted to do to my children and I. I have every bit of evidence that is necessary to prove this, and I have gone to every possible place. I went to the FBI. I've spent the last 8 years trying to figure out how to get this seen and heard so that this will stop. And instead, I've been ignored. So here's the thing. God and I have talked about this a lot. And there are a lot of domestic violence victims, children, men included, by the way. I just want to say that have been railroaded in these courts and re-victimized and re-victimized and re-victimized. I'm going to bring a name to mind, Nicole Merrill. Ironically, she has the same last name as me, but no, we are not related. But she was shot to death after seeking help in these family courts that don't work to help domestic violence victims. I'm making a call right now to the public. I'm telling my story as hard as it is. I am having federal crimes committed against me, not only by the man who still walks free, because, when he chased me out of the state of North Carolina because I was afraid for the safety of my kids and I, because he'd already taken my life once before in front of them, right? I should have had protection. I should have had help. My children should never have had to worry about what got done to them in these courts. I worry every single day about every story that I've heard from every parent that has been exploited the way that I have in these courts. I'm ready to do whatever it takes to get this situation taken care of. The Lord has assured me that they will no longer violate my rights if I just simply speak up. I am making an appeal to Andy Bashir. I am making an appeal to the Attorney General. I am making an appeal to the FBI. I am making an appeal to Senator Rand Paul. I am just one woman, but my children are my entire world. They have been harmed. They were hand-delivered to this man with all the evidence in place and me buried in court because I couldn't defend myself. The level of coercion in Hopkins County, Kentucky The level of law-breaking, horrid things. This place is called Hostage County for a reason. I'm terrified to leave my home because I know what's going to come with that, and it's going to be more police harassment, etc. Yep, you upset the wrong people by telling the truth about what they do, and they will come after you. It's been 8 years. I am making an appeal to the Commonwealth of Kentucky to intervene. I need help. I need help. I'm going to die at these people's hands, and I can prove it if somebody doesn't step in. All I want is to make the public aware that you can make a choice right now. You can listen to my story, and then you can tell yours. And you can make me feel not alone because you tell yours, and then maybe we'll get somewhere because people are talking about the crimes that are being committed against the citizens of this county. Or you can stay silent. If you stay silent, nothing ever changes. If you stay silent, the sheriff's department, the jail deaths, police department, and I want to say very clearly that not every officer is bad. There are some phenomenal ones here. But the corrupt ones are so corrupt that nobody can act normally in this city without worrying about what's going to be done to them. When are you going to get tired of that? Madisonville, Hopkins County residents, when are you going to get tired enough of that to do something about it? The jail deaths, the excessive force, the absolute harassment from law enforcement, the injustices done not only in the family courts, but also in the courts of justice for criminal things. I know that we are taught to trust the system. I made that mistake, and it cost me literally everything. At this point, we need some accountability. At this point, I'm willing to speak. I'm willing to tell my story. I'm willing to do whatever it takes. If it means that I am the one that's brave enough to start people truly talking about the crimes that take place against the citizens in this place, then that's okay. I'll take whatever they do to me. I know they're going to keep retaliating. They have been for years. I know that they're not going to leave me alone. I know that they're going to try to jail me for child support that I don't owe because they committed federal crimes against my children and I. But if my voice is enough to make at least one other person brave enough who's dealt with these family courts, who's dealt with the excessive force, the jail deaths, the criminal courts, if my voice is enough to remind people that our priority needs to be our future, protecting the kids and the residents in this county, then that's okay. I hope anybody can make any sense out of this. I'm sorry it was a little bit disconnected, but at this point, I can't hold it in anymore. At this point, the only defense that I have is to go and appeal to the public at this point. I'm tired of having federal crimes committed against my children and I. To this day, they continue. I'm tired of the literal torture chamber that this place is, Hostage County, Hopkins County, Kentucky. I'm tired of the fact that I have zero rights, period, no matter what, because people seek to take them, and since they're in positions of power, it's just allowed. Thank you, everybody, for listening. There's probably going to be a part 2 where I do this a little bit more refined, whatever you want to call it. All I can say, one time I released a word about the judgment that the Lord was getting ready to place on Hopkins County for the horrid things that are being done behind the scenes by the elected officials and the people in power that are abusing their power for unjust gain, and everybody laughed at me. I don't care if you like me or not. I don't care what you think of me or don't think of me. But I do care if you think about what happened to my children. I do care if you think about what happens to the other children in this community. I do care what you think about what happens to the citizens in this community when things continue to be done like they are here in Hostage County by the people that we trust in power. Father, I'm asking you in Jesus' name that everybody under the sound of my voice that has something to say about the corruption in this place, that they will absolutely say it. That they will not hold their voices or be silenced anymore. In the name of Jesus. I don't really care how foolish I just looked. I don't have any other way to tell you the truth other than to give you my story, emotion and all. Hopefully I'll be able to make a part 2. I do want to say before I stop this recording, I have no intention of taking my life. So I have not done anything criminal. So if I end up dead, or if I end up in jail, I understand it's retaliation. Have a good day.